Hi folks, just wanted to do a quick wrap-up video on the now passed debt limit deal that went out of the House of Representatives last night and is headed over to the Senate for a vote. Now, I had posed the question in all of that, did the Democrats and McCarthy, the Speaker of the House, make a deal that allowed the bill to get across the finish line? Well, we now have evidence that that may be the very thing that happened. So hang on, we're going to get into all of this in just 1 second. My name is Brian Trippett. I am your front porch conservative. Step on up to my electronic front porch and let's talk. Yesterday evening around 9:30 or 10 o'clock, as most Americans were getting ready for bed to get ready for their next hard work day, the U.S. House of Representatives passed Resolution 3746, the debt limit deal. Now, let's take a look at some of the numbers as far as who voted for it, and then also take a look at some news that's come out that may give you some pause. So we'll go first to the tally. And on the question, there were 314 yeses, 117 noes, but notice the breakdown. Of the 314 yeses, only 149 were Republicans, and the majority of the yeses came from the Democrats. Now, what was even more telling than that? Take a look at this. Of the 223 members of the House of Representatives who are Republican, McCarthy, the Speaker, lost 71 of them on this vote. And there were about 46 Democrats who joined them in voting in opposition to it. Now, I think all this is pretty telling. And I think it's also going to have some long-term implications for McCarthy and his caucus going forward. It's quite obvious by that tally. McCarthy has, on this question, lost credibility with fiscal conservatives in the House. And I don't think he's ever going to be able to get it back. When he says, I'm going to stand up to government spending, okay, big deal. You had a chance to do it and you blew it. You had every piece of negotiating leverage you needed and you blew it. You gave everything up and gave the Democrats more or less everything they want. Oh, there's some minor, clawbacks on spending and some caps on things, but the Democrats are still getting a $4 trillion increase to spending. They don't lose anything in all this, so it kind of makes sense that an overwhelming majority of Democrats would vote for this thing. But I need to point something out. Remember, for this thing to get to final passage, it's a two-step process. There's the vote for final passage, and then there's a vote just to bring the thing to the floor, which is what happened earlier in the day. Now, I posed the question, or maybe it's better to say I posited the theory, would Kevin McCarthy have to make a deal with Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader for the Democrats, in order to get his Democrats to cross over and help McCarthy just get this thing to a final vote? That may very well be what actually happened. Take a look at this. This is a report from the Gateway Pundit, and it's got some information I find very interesting. Headline: McCarthy and Jeffries deny claims of securing vote for debt ceiling bill with federal funding for projects in Democrat districts. In an article written by Jim Hoft, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries refute claims made by 4 Democratic sources who allege that the two leaders had struck a deal to secure Democrat votes for the debt ceiling advancement, Axios reported. Now, to go to that bill from Axios, headline: Jeffrey and McCarthy's offices say there was no deal to save the debt ceiling bill. Reading into it, spokespeople for House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries disputed 4 Democrat sources who told Axios the two leaders had cut a deal for Democrats to help advance the debt ceiling bill. 4 Democratic lawmakers said they had been told of a deal, with 2 saying they believed it involved boosting federal funding for projects in Democrat districts, otherwise known as earmarks or community project funding, if Democrats voted to advance the bill. Now, this story was written by Andrew Salander, and I'm trying to find the time that it posted, about 13 hours ago. So let's just say call it 11 o'clock Eastern last night on Wednesday. Now, the funny thing about all this is Axios is changing their story. Now, what am I getting at? Take a look at this. This is a tweet from Dan Bishop, who is a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. Look what he's got here. He quote tweets someone else. Scoop, McCarthy and Jeffries made a side deal on earmarks to secure critical Democrat votes to advance the debt ceiling rule. Four Democrat lawmakers briefed on the matters tell Axios. Now, wait a second. That was posted at around 10:30 last night. The other Axios story we looked at came out around 11:30, maybe midnight. So, which is it? Was there a deal? Wasn't there a deal? Well, call me conspiratorial if you wish, but I'm inclined to think there was a deal. You got to remember back to what happened. When the vote came down on the motion to advance the resolution, the yays were stuck at about 187. They couldn't move. Then all of a sudden, Democrat votes start swinging over, and they wind up passing the motion to advance the resolution by about 231, somewhere in that general area. That means 50 Democrats crossed over. Well, something made them do it. Now, the funny part is, you've got Axios saying on the one hand, hey, there was a side deal. We've got 4 different Democratic sources who confirm that. And then about an hour later, like, oh, no, we're denying everything. Well, which is it? Like I said, I'm inclined to believe, yeah, McCarthy cut a deal with Hakeem Jeffries. That's the only way he could get this thing to the finish line. And the proof of that is how many Democrats voted for this thing on final passage. They either got a deal up front or they realized, as most everybody else who can look at this bill does, that this thing doesn't do anything to really reduce government spending. Like I said, there's a little bit of drawback, a little bit of clawing back, if you want to use that term, but there's not really what's needed here. So, this thing heads over to the Senate. What happens next? Well, take a look at this. So far, there are about 12 confirmed no votes on this. And I'll show you the names real quick. You've got Ted Cruz of Texas, Mike Lee of Utah, Josh Hawley of Missouri, J.D. Vance of Ohio, Rand Paul of Kentucky, Bernie Sanders of Vermont, a Democrat, Tim Scott of South Carolina, Jeff Merkley, another Democrat from Oregon, Rick Scott from Florida, Mike Braun from Indiana, Ed Markey from Oregon, and Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts. Now, their motives are different for why they're voting against this, but it's already starting to face opposition in the Senate, so that sort of begs the question, can Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell cobble together enough votes to make this thing happen? We'll see, much like we had to do in the House. Now, there is one other aspect to all this that I want to touch on. And it's an argument that I think conservatives, I don't want to say they're using it for cover, but I think they're being very naive in their thought process. Thomas Massie, Republican of Kentucky, voted this thing out of the Rules Committee on the grounds that the way that the bill is written, it would force the House of Representatives to do what's called normal business. In other words, pass the 12 appropriations bills that they're required to do every fiscal year, and there'd be an orderly process to the whole thing. But somebody's written a column that points out something that Massie and his fellow yes votes are not considering. Take a look at this. This is from the Federalist, written by Christopher Jacobs. Headline, McCarthy's debt limit deal virtually guarantees another omnibus train wreck. Going a little bit further into the article, Section 102 of the debt limit bill will discourage Congress from considering spending bills through an open process involving committee markups and amendments. Now, I want to get into the guts of this thing. Section 102 of the debt limit bill, the language covering pages 12 through 15 of a 99-page measure, would adjust spending caps either or both for the next 2 fiscal years if a continuing resolution isn't in place by January 1st. For instance, fiscal year 2024 begins this coming October. If a continuing resolution is in place for any portion of the federal government as of January 1, then spending caps negotiated in the bill will be adjusted. In that sense, the bill would ensure that Congress passes each of the 12 full-year discretionary appropriation acts as the bill states. But Section 102 comes with a huge caveat. It doesn't prohibit passing those 12 acts in a single omnibus spending bill, as Congress has done far too often in recent years. Details of Section 102 also explain how the bill's incentives all point in the direction of an omnibus. These incentives will give Republican leadership a perfect excuse to ram through an omnibus bill just before Christmas. Otherwise, they will undoubtedly argue defense and national security interests will suffer from lower spending levels. They will, of course, neglect to point out that the hypothetical damage that would occur because of the deal McCarthy cut with Biden. Basically, what the author is getting at is this. See, Thomas Massey's making the argument, hey, we'll pass our 12 appropriations bills, and if we don't have, everything in place the way it should be, then, cuts are going to take place, or caps will take place on the spending. But the bill doesn't require that the appropriations bills have to be finished by a certain point. Translation, those 3,000 or 4,000 page omnibus spending bills that we get usually once a year because the Congress and the president can't negotiate the appropriations bills the way they do? Well, this thing doesn't stop that from happening. What's going to happen before Christmas, in the opinion of this author, and frankly yours truly, is that the Congress is going to put this amalgamation mess together and say, whoop, we got to do it. If we don't do it, we're going to have this disaster or this calamity or this problem. And on down the road we go. As I'm watching this thing play out, frankly, as far as I'm concerned, if this is the best that the Congress can do, they never should have even tried. McCarthy never should have gone to the White House to negotiate with Biden. If we can't do any better than a country than to come up with this kind of nonsense, it's time to get a new Congress. But anyway, that's my opinion on it. As we get ready to wrap this up, please do me some favors as always. Number 1, subscribe to the channel. Number 2, leave a comment. Number 3, remember to share the video around. Number 4, give me a thumbs up. And number 5, keep on coming back. Anyway, my name is Brian Trippett. I'm your Front Porch Conservative. I'll see you next time.